Britney Spears continues to fight her personal enslavement to her alcoholic father, aka the conservatorship that has put this man in charge of all her affairs, including her reproduction, for 13 years. The case was just back in front of a judge in Los Angeles Superior Court. This is the first return to court after Spears herself spoke to the judge last month, pleading for her 13-year conservatorship to end. Joining us to discuss not just the Britney case, but also what is conservatorship. And I can't think of a better person to have this conversation with. Harriet Fraad is here with us. Dr. Harriet Fraad, mental health counselor and hypnotherapist in practice in New York City. Harriet is a founding member of the second wave feminist movement, and she hosts the fabulous podcast, Capitalism Hits Home. Harriet, thanks so much for joining me here today.
Thank you. I'm really glad to be here and glad to talk about these things, both Britney Spears, whose enslavement I have followed, even though I was never a fan of her style or her music. I'm certainly aware of her enslavement, and also would like to talk about it because it's an allegory. I think it's captured America because it's an allegory for some of the gender issues, the sex issues, the male supremacy issues, and the sex and class issues, particularly the class issues, because, she's netted about 500 million. She now has 60 million. Jamie Spears, her father, has control of the rest, and he used it to keep her enslaved. So if we talk about it, we could begin, I suppose, with gender. Because Britney got her start at 13, they kind of rented her out. And at 16, she had her first hit single, Baby One More Time. And there she was in an oversexed parochial schoolgirl outfit, appealing to the pedophiles.
Isn't it? The title is even, the song goes, "Hit Me, Baby, One More Time." Right. So it's even more kind of disgusting.
It sure
no
is.
offense to Britney. No offense to her. I am 100% on her side in this, regardless of what. I don't think she wrote those lyrics.
No, she didn't write any of her lyrics. Plus, she didn't design her presentation as a kind of titillation for men looking at a young woman who has no sexual experience but is tantalizing to men, which is a pedophilic thrill of a woman who doesn't know her sexuality and yet is a sex object because she's wearing a little pleated plaid skirt, parochial school uniform, and a white top, but a midriff top. And she's this coy, sugary sex object who doesn't enjoy or know sex, but wants to entice men. And she's a male supremacy poster child. I don't know what's going on. I'm just so sexy and cute. And
yeah.
So that is hardly feminist. I mean, that's the opposite. That's what we're trying to escape. And I think she had a huge fan base who identified with that contradiction between the sexy woman who doesn't know what's happening and can't enjoy her own body, which is what they presented. And that kind of gender backwardness from which women are trying to escape. Also, her exploitation, her being forced when she was tired or when she wasn't feeling well to perform with her male father, taking all the money and giving her an allowance. For example, Sam Ingham, who was a court-appointed person, but Jamie took over payment and paid him $500,300 a year. So he amassed $3 million, and her father controlled this man. So he never told her legal options in a conservatorship, because in a conservatorship, you have 5 days to plead whether you want this or not. And it means that the person is incapable of managing him or her or themselves, and therefore needs to be, quote, protected. And she was, quote, protected out of all her earnings.
I think that's so interesting. There's so much to this case that actually seems very that has nothing to do with her, maybe needing a break or having some drug addiction issues, some whatever. I mean, what woman who is put up in that position at such a young age doesn't then come crashing down? I mean, we've seen this over and over, from Maryland to these others. I mean, I don't understand anyway. So that's a side issue, but it certainly seems like this is basically a Britney Spears racket, where the father, her own lawyer didn't tell her, didn't legally counsel her properly. So shouldn't he be liable for that? And now he's jumping ship. He doesn't even want to be the lawyer anymore.
Of course.
Meanwhile, this other lady, Jody Montgomery, the fiduciary care professional, it's so mafia-like that it kind of blows my mind. She was helping Harriet. She was the story is that after Britney spoke out in court last month, her lawyer submitted a filing suggesting that Montgomery, who was this licensed personal fiduciary care professional who was also appointed as a second conservator for Britney when her father faced a health crisis, and Britney likes this lady. She feels, kind of like she appreciates the presence and guidance of this woman, in her own words, in Britney's own words. Meanwhile, this woman, Montgomery, has to have extra security for her personally because she's been getting death threats. And Jamie, the father, is like blocking her from using Britney's money to pay for her security. Meanwhile, he's taking all the money. It is just, once you see all these little details, the lawyer wants out because he's probably liable now.
Yes, he is.
The woman who's helping, actually is getting death threats. This is very organized.
Very organized. It was also organized that her father controlled every aspect of her life. She couldn't have an independent phone call. They were there watching her when she went to the gym to work out. They watched her every move. And if she ever got close to anyone, whether it was a makeup artist or a hairdresser or whoever they allowed to interact with her, they were fired immediately. Her father cemented control. And I think it appealed to the public on a lot of different levels. One is, people go to work, and even if they're labeled, quote, essential, someone is pocketing the money they earn, and they get a pittance. Sam Ingham got $3,200 a week. She was allowed only $2,000 a week, and they watched everything. She couldn't go out to an expensive luncheon or else. Her father declared that she was senile. Just what? Like they say, the workers are lucky. We're protecting them. Sure.
Meanwhile, she's doing concerts and making money.
And memorizing countless lyrics and dance moves. So she's obviously not senile. Her father doesn't want any interference. He doesn't want her to have the baby she wants. So he forces her to have an intrauterine coil so she can't conceive. And
how is this legal?
Well, it wasn't, but she didn't know her legal rights because her representative was paid off by her father, and every move was controlled. And what's really important for the American public is she got free when she called it out publicly, when she got on TikTok and she spoke out and that she was a slave. And then suddenly her fans saw this, and so did everyone else. Because if Americans just take it and they don't know their rights and they don't speak up, they'll get screwed too, and they'll get controlled too.
As I interacted on some of the free, I mean, some people were having, doing a free Britney thing, a movement for her before this all came out. Absolutely. In the court. And as I'm following this, I'm interacting with people on the internet, and Britney has become a figurehead of sorts for other people who are being put in conservatorships across the country against their will and perhaps illegally. Do you know about what's going on there on a broader spectrum?
On a broader spectrum, conservatees have a right to appeal. They have a right to legally appeal, but they are not informed of those rights. They also have 5 days in which they can contest a conservatorship, but they're not informed that they only have 5 days, and they're kept ignorant. One of the things that kept Britney ignorant is what happens to the American people. She was heavily medicated, as if she needed medication, and it made her sluggish and numb. 1 out of 4 American women is on psych meds, not necessary. 6% of all kids are on psych meds so that they can be quiet in school rather than have a school curriculum that uses their physical energy, which is what it should do. But, this is a medicated nation. And in school, kids are medicated against their will. The school will kick you out if you don't agree to put your kid on Ritalin, even though Ritalin was arrested. The makers of Ritalin were arrested with a conspiracy to get a psychiatrist, which they got, to say that Ritalin was necessary for ADHD, a hyperactivity disorder, in order to pacify the children and sell Ritalin. Americans are hoodwinked by the psych med industry. So we're the most medicated people on earth. We're less than 6% of the world's population, and we take 66% of the world's psych drugs. There's something wrong.
I think it's
profitable. That's why.
I think thoughts I've had is you've touched on is, they're supposed to behave in school, which is not necessarily what children are actually supposed to do. They're not supposed to necessarily sit there and learn math for 40 minutes and then go sit somewhere else and learn something else for that's not exactly, in line with real development. It is in line with making people cogs in a machine that then can be used in capitalism for whatever the purpose of the capitalist is.
Yeah.
Like if you're not useful to capitalism, you get drugged so that you can be.
That's right. So that you can stand at an intensely boring job for long hours, whether it's cleaning chickens for Tyson chicken industry, or whether it's on some kind of assembly line repeating the same task, that there is medication to numb people out so that they're numb and dumb. And after long hours of exploitation, all they have energy for is to sit at home and watch TV, which includes ads for psych drugs, even though we're the only country in the Western world that allows public advertisements of pharmaceuticals. And so on all those levels, whether it's exploitation for money, whether it's exploitation by the pharmaceutical industry, whether it's a sex role that's presented as this dumb banana who's very coy and sugary and childlike and doesn't know what's going on, or whether it's this male supremacy, because they get away with it in part because she's a woman. I don't know if they could have gotten away with that amount of control if she were male. I doubt it. And the people who are in conservatorships are overwhelmingly women, usually old women, whose kids put them in there so they can control them and their money. And so it exposes a level of capitalist corruption that's wild. It's really wild. And meanwhile, Britney Spears' father has been collecting on a level that's wild. He allows her $2,000 a month. Meanwhile, he forces her to perform. In 4 years, she released 4 albums. And to promote them, she did a global tour for which, not she, but her father appropriated $131 million. She promoted the X Factor. She was paid $50 million for that, and he took it. She did 4 years, then hit Las Vegas residency, for which her father netted $300 million. Now her assets.
You think she could sue him for that? I don't know the legal.
I think she could. He certainly abused his conservatorship and did his best to protect her from the truth and dumb her down. She's left with $60 million in assets. What happened to this $500 million that she had? Well, partly he was paying off everybody to shut her up. her psychiatrist, the person who medicated her, the person who was her legal guardian, her hairdresser, the guards, whatever. And also, no doubt, hiding considerable assets for himself.
This is horrible. I mean, half of America wants to be famous and would love to be a Britney Spears. You know, everybody's trying on Facebook to get people to follow them and like them and all that. And this is what happens when you reach that level. I guess
it can happen. Look, they called two 1550s on her. One, because 1550 is when the helicopters are overhead, the cops and the ambulance come, they strap you to a gurney and they take you to a psych facility. One was
why do you need a fucking helicopter for a young woman?
To intimidate her with the police presence. And that was because she didn't want to return her baby after a supervised visit. She wanted to hold on to the baby because she wanted the baby. And they didn't obviously need all that. The other was when she was having a breakdown because she did have an alcohol problem and a drug problem. But you don't need to do all that. It's to intimidate and show that the forces of control were on the conservative side, the conservator side, so that she couldn't fight back. And that's what really captured the American people. She's everywhere. Everywhere you look, Britney Spears.
This just makes me so angry. It makes me personally angry. The way, I mean, from a feminist perspective, the fact that she wanted to stay with her child. I don't understand how that could possibly be, you know, something criminal. Or how about 10 more minutes? Or how about let's see what we can do? Isn't it absolutely natural? Doesn't it show mental fitness that one would want to be with their own child?
And even her enemies, no one said she was an unfit mother. By the way, there is no expression unfit father, although of course there should be. And she was always kind and wonderful with her children and suffered enormously from having them removed from her. She also wanted another child and was presented and forcibly subjected to an IUD she didn't want because her father knew that she wouldn't be performing as the little cutie sex object if she was pregnant. So that, you know, every force has been brought against her. And because her Sam Ingham, her quote, legal representative, never told her what she could do to get free, she didn't know.
At some point, she can't continue to perform as a 14-year-old sex object. She's in her 30s now, going to be 40. Pretty soon it's going to fall apart a little bit. And like Madonna's not fooling anybody. You know what I mean? It's like, I wish Madonna has disappointed me because I was a fan because I was young when she was coming up. And now that she hasn't grown into something bigger or greater. She's still trying to like put on a cone bra and flag people down naked in the street. I want these female singers and artists to grow into
their womanhood. Well,
maybe she could do that, Britney. I mean, not that I'm sure they're keeping her away from having any free.
They are having any say, but Britney wants to take a leave, and she may reemerge. She's obviously not a teenager anymore.
At some point, you will see age.
That's right, but she also still has that coy, sexy, innocent. Although the songs that were popular lately have been "I'm so lonely," "I'm terrified," you know. Things like that, which she did convincingly because she was a prisoner. Even the ACLU today decided that they would represent her.
That is exciting, I think. I mean, the ACLU, you know, you some good, some bad, what they're doing, but that is exciting. What do you think of the ramifications that the ACLU are representing her?
Well, I think that first of all, they're doing it because she's been enslaved, and slavery is illegal except in prisons in the United States. And so, and also because she represents the infantilization of women, the sexualization of women, the imprisonment of women in abusive relationships, the financial discrimination against women, and the exploitation, which is the idea that if you're making money, people don't question how you're making money, at whose expense. And she was being ruthlessly exploited by a father who even her mother said they had a toxic relationship, that this man was sick.
He was absent for most of her life. I don't understand how he can just step back in. I'm from New York. Is he a front for some other organization that's siphoning money? I want to know what's going on.
I think he decided to step in when there was money in it for him. He's like those people before child labor was banned. Like my own great grandfather had 9 children, had them all working, and kept his nails manicured because he didn't have to.
What do you think? What do you think has been the psychological cost to Britney Spears herself or someone in her position?
I think it's a huge psychological cost, but I think her victory, and look, most Americans have a huge psychological cost being exploited, knowing nobody cares about them, and everything they see on television, if they say, try this, it'll make you happy, is just to get money out of you. And they're surrounded by lies, because advertisements are usually lies or at minimum exaggerations. And they go home and they're desperate and unhappy. And then they take psych drugs, which they have to buy. And so she captured, for most people, even people like me who don't particularly go for that sugary, coy, infantile sex stuff, she captured our hearts because she was enslaved and exploited in a super destructive way. And her father, who was an unfit father by all accounts, the mother said that they had a toxic relationship, that he was abusive. When he saw money in it, he stepped right up. And that's what he did.
Well, I wish her the best of luck. I know she's literally in court right now this afternoon. So by the end of this day, I imagine there will be some sort of judgment. I don't believe it's to end the conservatorship, because whoever the new judge is, it's probably bought off. I don't know, Judge Penny something.
Well, there was a judge who twice waived her right to decide. She was supposed to have 5 days to decide on the renewal of her conservatorship, and her conservatorship in the first place, and a corrupt, sexist judge just waived her rights.
And she has a new judge now, but that judge also just recently said that the conservatorship would not be ended. So I don't know how this is going to end, but I do think activism has been useful. Yeah. And I thank you for your time and your consideration of this issue.
Well, I'm glad to have a chance to bring this issue out. It's very important. Everyone's identification with this exploited woman, exploited on so many levels.
Harriet Fraad, your podcast, Capitalism Hits Home, is found on the Democracy at Work Network. You can go and find it on YouTube. I highly recommend it. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks.